During my morning walk, my daughter-in-law pushed me and faked an accident, but I already had 5 million safely hidden away, far from her. I never thought the day would come when my own family would see me as a burden. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for a second you feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask you to hit the like button and subscribe. It will help me keep venting. It was a Tuesday morning in my home in Seattle, Washington. The sun was filtering through the lace curtains I had embroidered 30 years ago, when I still believed that family love was unbreakable. My hands, now wrinkled and spotted by age, trembled as I held the cup of coffee I had made. The same blue mug with yellow flowers that my late husband Arthur had given me on our 20th anniversary. The house smelled of cinnamon and drip coffee, as always. But something had changed in the last few months. The silence was different, heavier, colder. It was no longer the tranquil silence of a 73-year-old woman enjoying her retirement. It was the silence of someone who had begun to feel invisible in her own life. I found myself staring at my reflection in the dining room window, my grey hair always neatly styled, my wrinkles that told stories of laughter and tears. When had my opinion stopped mattering? When had I stopped being Eleanor, the retired teacher who had educated 3 generations of children at the local elementary school, to become the old lady who's in the way? The phone rang. It was Robert, my only son. "Mom, how are you this morning?" I wondered if he was multitasking while talking to me. "Fine, honey," I said. "Just having my little coffee and thinking about going to the Pike Place market to do some shopping." "Oh yeah, that's great," he interrupted. "Listen, Mom, Gina and I have been talking. You know we worry about you a lot, living alone in that big house." My heart started to race. I had heard that phrase before, from my friends in the knitting group. It was the prelude to something I wasn't going to like. "Robert, I am perfectly fine. I have Mrs. Rodriguez who comes to help me twice a week. And—" "No, Mom, it's not that. It's just— well, last week you fell in the backyard, right? And if our neighbor, Mr. Harrison, hadn't been there—" I touched my right knee, where I still had the bruise from that silly fall while watering my geraniums. It had been nothing serious, just a trip over the hose. But apparently that fall had awakened something in Robert and Gina. "Son, that was a very minor accident. I didn't even need to go to the doctor." "Mom, please. Gina and I have already decided. You're coming to live with us. We've already fixed up the guest room for you. This way, we'll feel calmer." My breath caught in my throat. Moving in with them meant leaving my house, my memories, my independence. It meant leaving the garden where Arthur and I had planted the lemon tree that now gave the sweetest lemons in the neighborhood. It meant abandoning the rocking chair where I had held Robert when he was a baby, where I had knitted his first sweaters. "Robert, son, I don't want to leave my house. All my memories are here. My life." "Mom, don't be stubborn. It's for your own good. Besides, think about it. That way you won't spend so much on the cleaning lady, on gas, on food, and we can take better care of you." His words sounded like a sentence. There was no question in his tone. There was no room for negotiation. It was a decision made by others about my own life. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. I stayed sitting in my dining room, surrounded by the photographs that told the story of my family. Robert as a baby in my arms. Robert graduating as an engineer. Robert on his wedding day with Gina, smiling while I held the bouquet that was supposed to bring eternal happiness. Gina, my daughter-in-law for 8 years, a 42-year-old woman, always perfectly dressed, always with a smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. She worked in real estate and had that way of talking that made everything sound like a business transaction. even family conversations. From the beginning, I had noticed her way of evaluating the things in my house. Her eyes would linger on my china cabinet, on the living room set that Arthur and I had bought with so much effort, on the jewelry I kept in my vanity. "You have such nice things, mother-in-law," she would always say. But there was something in her tone that made me uncomfortable. A week later, Robert arrived with a moving truck. "Everything's settled, Mum," he said. "Gina even bought flowers for your new room." There was no turning back. As I packed my most cherished belongings, I felt as if I were attending my own funeral. Every object I wrapped in newspaper was a piece of my history that was vanishing. Robert and Gina's house in the Upper West Side of New York was modern, minimalist, cold, all white and grey, soulless, without history. My room was in the back, far from the common areas, like it was a service room. "So you can have more privacy, mother-in-law," Gina explained to me with that smile I knew so well. "And look, we put this buzzer here in case you need anything at night, so you don't have to be yelling across the house." A buzzer, as if I were terminally ill, as if my voice no longer had the right to be heard in that house. The first night was the longest of my life, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled of new paint instead of lavender, listening to unfamiliar noises. There was no lemon tree in the garden. There was no rocking chair by the window. There was nothing of mine, except the suitcase with my dresses and the photograph of Arthur that I had managed to save from the rushed move. I got up to use the restroom 3 times that night, and each time, as I passed through the hallway, I heard Robert and Gina's voices in their bedroom. They were talking in whispers, but the tone was argumentative. I managed to catch fragments. "It won't be easy. You have to be patient. It's worth it." Worth it. Was I worth it for something specific they had planned? The first few weeks at Robert and Gina's house passed like a strange dance of forced courtesies and awkward silences. I tried to adapt, to be the perfect mother-in-law who didn't bother anyone, who didn't voice an opinion, who silently appreciated the favor they were doing me. Every morning I got up early, as I had done all my life. At 0 hours 6 minutes, I was already in the kitchen, preparing coffee for everyone. It was my way of feeling useful, of justifying my presence in that house that made me feel more and more like an intruder every day. "Good morning, Gina," I would say to her when she came downstairs at 0 hours 7 minutes, always perfectly dressed for work, with those heels that sounded like hammer blows on the marble floor. "Oh, yes. Good morning, Eleanor," she would reply without looking at me, while checking her phone. "You didn't have to get up so early. We have our routine." Her message was clear. I was disrupting the established order. My presence was an annoyance, even if it was to do something as simple as making coffee. But I couldn't help it. For 40 years of marriage with Arthur, it had been my morning ritual. Getting up, putting on the coffee, making breakfast. It was what gave meaning to my mornings, what made me feel like I still had a purpose. One day, while I was washing the breakfast cups, Gina approached the kitchen counter with an expression I hadn't seen before. More serious, more calculating. "Eleanor, Robert and I have been thinking, you have that house in Seattle that's sitting empty, right?" My heart stopped. My house, my home. The place where I had built a life with Arthur, where I had raised Robert, where every corner held a memory. "Yes, it's closed up for now," I replied cautiously. "It's just, well, it's a shame that it's deteriorating without use, and the maintenance costs must be high. Property tax, utilities, water." She was right about that. Keeping the house locked up did generate expenses. But it was my house. It was my refuge, my backup plan if things didn't work out here. Robert told me that your father left you that property mortgage-free. Lucky you, right? These days, having a property like that in Seattle must be worth, how much? About $8 million? The figure hung in the air like an invisible trap. Gina knew the value of my property perfectly well. She had looked it up. Well, I don't know exactly how much. Oh, mother-in-law, don't be modest. A house like that, in that area, at least 8 million. Robert and I were thinking you could rent it out. Or better yet, sell it. Imagine all that money well invested, instead of spending it on maintaining an empty house. I froze. They didn't just want me to live with them. They wanted me to sell my house. Gina, that house holds a lot of memories for me. Oh yes, the memories. But memories don't pay expenses, mother-in-law. And at your age, the most important thing is financial security. We could help you manage that money. Robert knows a lot about investments. That night, when Robert came home from work, he called me into his study. It was the first time we had spoken alone since I arrived at their house. Mum, Gina told me that you already talked about the house in Seattle, Robert said. That house, Mum, understand me. It's not practical to keep a property closed up, and the money from the sale would give you peace of mind for the rest of your life. I looked him in the eyes, searching for the child I had raised, the young man who had studied engineering with the money that Arthur and I had saved penny by penny. That child who cried when he hurt himself and ran into my arms looking for comfort. Son, do you also want me to sell my house? Robert looked away. That was his answer. It's not that I want to, Mom. It's just, well, you have to think about the future. What happens if you get sick? What if you need special care? All that costs money. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced this speech with Gina, as if they had planned this conversation step by step. Robert, I have my teacher's pension, and I have savings. Mum, the pension doesn't cover anything nowadays, and savings run out. On the other hand, 8 million well invested can give you a very good monthly income. 8 million. That figure again. As if they had already appraised my house. As if they had already calculated how much my independence was worth. That night, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of my borrowed room, remembering all the times I had sacrificed things for Robert. When he was 12 and wanted a bicycle that cost 2 months of Arthur's salary, I sold my original engagement ring to buy it for him. When he was in college, Arthur and I only took one vacation in 10 years to pay his tuition. When he got married, we mortgaged the house to give him the wedding Gina dreamed of. And now, at 73, they were asking me to sell the only thing that truly belonged to me. The following days were a subtle campaign of pressure. Gina would leave brochures for retirement homes in case I was interested in looking at options. Robert would mention cases of elderly people who had been victims of robberies in isolated houses. I even found, by chance, a real estate appraisal of my house on the dining room table. One afternoon, while Gina was at work and Robert was at the office, I decided to call my friend Mary, my co-worker from school for 30 years. Eleanor, honey, how are you? I haven't seen you at the market in weeks. Well, I came to live with Robert and his wife, Mary. Seriously? And how is that going? Her question hung in the air. How was it going? How could I explain that I felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage? How could I tell her that every day I woke up feeling smaller, more invisible? Fine, Mary. Everything's fine. But my voice broke as I said fine, and Mary noticed immediately. Eleanor, you don't sound right. What's going on? And then, for the first time in weeks, someone asked me how I felt. Someone noticed that something wasn't right. The tears began to fall without permission. Mary, I think they want me to sell my house. What? Who is it? Robert and Gina. They say it's for my own good. But, but nothing, Eleanor. That house is yours. No one has the right to pressure you to sell it. Her words were like a glass of cold water in my face. She was right. It was my house. It was my decision. But when I hung up the phone, Gina was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had arrived without me hearing her. Who were you talking to, mother-in-law? With my friend Mary. Ah, and what were you chatting about? Of the house, I replied without thinking. Gina's expression changed. The mask of courtesy dropped for a second, and I saw something cold, calculating. I hope you're not going around telling things that aren't true, Eleanor. The family should resolve its issues privately. That night, Robert called me into his study again. Mum, Gina told me you spoke to Mary about our family matters. Robert, Mary has been my friend for 30 years. Mum, that doesn't matter. Gina is right. Family matters stay in the family. I don't want you going around saying we're pressuring you to sell the house, because it's not true. Wasn't it true? Then what had all those conversations about 8 million, about financial security, about the future been? Son, I didn't say you were pressuring me. Perfect. Then we agree that this is your decision, that we are only advising you, and that there is no pressure from us. I felt trapped. If I said yes, I would be lying. If I said no, I would be accusing my own son of being a liar. Yes, Robert, it's my decision. That night, for the first time since I arrived at their house, I cried. I cried for Arthur, who was no longer there to protect me. I cried for the independent woman I had been, and who seemed to be disappearing day by day. I cried for my empty house in Seattle, waiting for me like a refuge that it seemed less and less likely I would ever be able to return to. And for the first time, a terrible question began to form in my mind. Did they really want me here out of love? Or was there something else? Something that had to do with $8 million and an old woman who was becoming more vulnerable, easier to manipulate every day. But I still didn't want to believe that my own son was capable of something like that. I still clung to the hope that all of this was a product of my imagination, of my natural resistance to change. I still didn't know that the worst was yet to come. The weeks turned into a labyrinth of small humiliations that fell on me like constant drops of water, eroding my dignity drop by drop. Gina had a special talent for making me feel invisible while maintaining that perfect smile she showed in public. Eleanor, could you try not to make so much noise in the mornings? Robert needs to rest for work. She would say when I tried to make myself a cup of tea at 0 hours 7 minutes. But when her friends came over for coffee, the volume of their laughter and conversations made the dining room glasses tremble. Then the noise didn't matter. It only mattered when I made it. I stopped using the kitchen in the mornings. I stopped walking through the living room when they were watching television. I stopped giving my opinion on any subject during meals. I became a ghost in that house, moving in silence, taking up the least amount of space possible. One Sunday, while we were having lunch, Gina casually commented, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, Eleanor. A woman came by yesterday asking for you. She said she was your neighbor from Seattle." The woman, what was her name? Oh, yes, Evelyn. Mrs. Evelyn, my neighbor for 40 years, the one who watched my house when I traveled, the one who watered my plants when I was sick. What did she want? I asked, feeling a pang of hope for news of my neighborhood, of my former life. I don't know. Something about water getting into your house because of the rain. She asked if you could go see what had happened. My heart sped up. My house. My poor, abandoned house. And you told her that... I told her that you didn't live there anymore, that you were living with us now. and that if there was any problem with the property, she should talk to Robert because he handles your affairs. But Gina, I want to go see my house. Oh, mother-in-law, why are you going to cause yourself problems? If there's something to fix, Robert can send someone. You don't have to worry about those things. Robert nodded without looking up from his plate. Mum, Gina is right. If there's damage, I'll take care of it. You don't need to go all the way there. But I did need to go. I needed to see my house, breathe the air of my garden, sit in my rocking chair. Remember who I had been before I became this diminished version of myself. It's my house, Robert. I want to see it. Silence settled on the table like a tombstone. Robert put his fork down on the plate with more force than necessary. Mum, don't be stubborn. If you want to go, we'll go next weekend. But not alone. When had I lost the right to go to my own house alone? When had I stopped being an adult woman capable of making her own decisions to become a minor who needed supervision? That afternoon, while Robert and Gina went out to visit some friends, without inviting me, of course, I made a decision. I called a taxi and went to Seattle. The driver, an older gentleman with a white moustache, recognized me. Mrs. Eleanor, how are you? I haven't seen you around the neighborhood in a long time. Hello, Mr. Arthur. I went to live with my son. Ah, that's good. Family is the most important thing. Are you going to check on your house? Yes. It seems water got in. During the ride, Mr. Arthur told me about the changes in the neighborhood, about the neighbors he had seen, about the life that continued in my absence. His words were like a balm to my wounded soul. When we arrived at my street, my heart leaped. There was my house, with its red brick facade and its blue-framed windows that Arthur had painted the last year of his life. But it looked sad, abandoned. The garden plants were dry, leaves accumulated at the gate. I opened the front door, and the smell of confinement hit me like a slap in the face. My house, my home, was dying of loneliness. I walked through every room, caressing the dust-covered furniture, remembering the stories they held. In the master bedroom, I opened the closet where some of Arthur's suits still hung. I buried my face in one of his shirts, and for a moment, I could smell his cologne, feel his presence. In the kitchen, the damp stain on the ceiling was obvious. Mrs. Evelyn was right. Water had gotten in. But it was nothing serious, nothing that couldn't be fixed with good waterproofing. I sat in my rocking chair by the window, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe deeply. Here I was, Eleanor Stewart, Arthur's widow, the teacher who had educated 3 generations, the woman who had raised a professional son, the owner of this house that had been built with love and sacrifice. I wasn't the burdensome old woman who ate in silence at her daughter-in-law's house. I wasn't the burden everyone whispered about. It was me, the real me. The phone rang as the sun began to set. It was Robert, and his voice sounded more agitated than normal. Mum, where are you? We got home and you weren't there. I came to see my house, son. As you told me, Mrs. Evelyn. You went alone. I told you not to go alone. What if something happens to you? What if you fall again? Robert, I arrived perfectly fine. I took a taxi with Mr. Arthur, who has known me for years. No, Mum, that can't be. You can't be wandering around alone. We're on our way to get you. He hung up before I could protest. I stayed sitting in my rocking chair, watching the golden light of the sunset filter through the windows, knowing that at any moment they would arrive to snatch me away from my refuge. When I heard the car pull into the driveway, I took a deep breath. Robert burst in like a storm, followed by Gina, who wore that thinly veiled expression of annoyance. Mum, you scared us terribly. How could you come alone? Robert, it's my house. I have the right to come whenever I want. Yes, but not alone. Did you see? Is there dampness? The house is deteriorating. What if a piece of the ceiling falls? What if you trip over something? Gina walked through the living room, evaluating everything with those appraiser eyes I knew so well. Oh, mother-in-law, look at the state of everything. The dampness is going to bring mold, and the garden is a mess. Maintaining this is going to cost a fortune. It can be fixed, I insisted. It's just waterproofing the roof and pruning the garden. And who's going to be here to supervise? Who's going to make sure no thieves break in? Empty houses attract problems, mother-in-law. Robert nodded at every word his wife said like a puppet. Mum, Gina is right. This house needs a lot of work, and you can't be coming here all the time to supervise. I could come back to live here, I said, and my own words surprised me. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert and Gina looked at each other with an expression I couldn't completely decipher, but which sent a chill down my spine. Mum, are you crazy? Coming to live alone in a house that's falling apart? At your age? With the health problems you've had? I don't have health problems, Robert. I only fell once. Once that we know of. How many times have you fallen when no one is present? How many times have you been dizzy and not told us? Dizzy? Where did he get that from? Robert, I haven't been dizzy. Mum, the doctor at the hospital where we took you after the fall told me that dizziness is common at your age, that we need to monitor you more closely. He was lying. The doctor had never said that. I had been present throughout the consultation. Son, that's not true. Mum, sometimes we don't remember things well. It's normal at your age. That's why it's better for you to be with us, where we can take care of you. I felt as if I were falling into a deep well. My own son was inventing symptoms I didn't have, memory problems that didn't exist, to justify why I couldn't live alone. Gina approached and put her hand on my shoulder with that false tenderness I had learned to fear. Mother-in-law, we love you very much. That's why we worry. That's why we want you to be safe with us. But I no longer felt loved. I felt captured. That night, back in my borrowed room, I stayed awake very late. For the first time since I arrived at Robert's house, a terrible certainty began to crystallize in my mind. This wasn't love. This wasn't family care. This was something much darker. And I, like a fool, had walked right into the trap. The next day, as we were having breakfast, Gina casually dropped another bombshell. Oh, Eleanor, I forgot to tell you, the bank called yesterday. Something about some documents for your account that you need to sign. What documents? I don't know. Something about updating your information. Robert offered to accompany you so you don't have to make the trip alone. Accompany me. It was no longer just going with me. It was accompanying me. Like you accompany a child or someone who can't handle their own affairs. But what bothered me most was something else. I hadn't received any call from the bank, and my phone worked perfectly. How was it possible that the bank would call Robert's house when I had never registered that number as a contact? And why did Gina know about my bank accounts? A horrible suspicion began to germinate in my mind. A suspicion I didn't want to believe, but which was becoming harder to ignore every day. That afternoon, when Gina went out to work and Robert was at the office, I called the bank from the house phone. Good morning. This is Eleanor Stewart. I wanted to ask about a call you supposedly made yesterday. One moment, Mrs. Stewart, let me check. No, Mrs. Stewart. There is no record of any call from us. In fact, your account is perfectly up to date, and you don't need to update any documents. I hung up with trembling hands. Gina had lied. She had invented that bank call. Why? The answer came that same night. When I heard Robert and Gina talking in their bedroom, their voices came through the thin walls. And although I couldn't understand everything, some phrases filtered through with terrifying clarity. She has to sign the papers, power of attorney, when we have access to the accounts. My blood ran cold. Power of attorney, access to the accounts. They didn't want to take care of me. They wanted to control me. They wanted legal access to my money, my properties, my whole life. And worst of all, my own son was at the center of this conspiracy. The following days were a confusing mixture of paranoia and denial. Part of me wanted to believe that I had misunderstood the conversations, that my aging mind was creating ghosts where there were none. But another part, the part that had survived 73 years in this world, knew how to recognize danger when it saw it. The lie about the bank call had been like lifting a stone and discovering the worms wriggling underneath. Once you saw the first one, it was impossible not to see all the others. I began to pay attention to details I had previously ignored. The way Gina would check my mail before giving it to me. How Robert would casually ask about my bank accounts during dinner. The frequency with which they mentioned the word security when talking about my future. One Wednesday morning, while they were at work, I decided to check my email on Robert's computer. He had left the session open, and there, in his inbox, I found something that chilled my blood. An email from a notary's office. Dear Mr. Stewart, we attach the draft of the broad power of attorney you requested for your mother. As discussed, this document will grant you complete authority over all financial and legal decisions of Mrs. Stewart. My hands trembled as I read. A broad power of attorney. That meant Robert would have total control over my life. My bank accounts, my house, my medical decisions, everything. And he was processing it behind my back. I kept reading and found more emails. One from a real estate agency asking about the appraisal of a property in Seattle. Another from an accountant consulting on tax strategies for the sale of family assets. They didn't just want to control my money, they were already planning to sell my house. I printed all the emails with trembling hands and hid them in my room, under the mattress. That night I couldn't eat dinner. I told them I had a stomachache. But the truth was that I couldn't swallow anything knowing what I knew. The next day, Robert arrived home early from work with a folder in his hands and that forced smile I had learned to dread. Mom, I have good news. I consulted with a lawyer on how best to protect your assets, and he recommended that we process a power of attorney. That way, if something happens to you, I can manage your affairs without legal complications. The performance was perfect. His tone was that of a concerned son, not someone who had already been processing documents behind my back for weeks. What kind of power of attorney? I asked, feigning ignorance. A broad one, so we don't have limitations. That way I can help you with everything. The bank, taxes, the house. Robert, I handle my affairs perfectly fine. Mum, I know you think that. But you saw what happened with the house. You only noticed the damage when it was too late. And the other day, you almost forgot to take your medication. Another lie. I didn't take medication, only vitamins that he himself had insisted I needed. Son, I don't take medication. Vitamins are medication, Mom. And last night I saw you confused, looking for the bathroom. More lies. I knew the layout of that house perfectly. I had never gotten lost looking for the bathroom. Gina appeared at that moment, as if she had been waiting for the signal. Mother-in-law, Robert is right. It's just a precaution. Besides, the notary can come here to the house so you don't have to go out. A notary coming to the house. How convenient. That way, there would be no external witnesses. No one who could question whether I was signing voluntarily. I don't want to sign any power of attorney, I said with the firmest voice I could muster. Robert's smile vanished for a fraction of a second, enough for me to see the real frustration beneath the mask. Mum, don't be stubborn. It's for your own good. I decide what's for my own good, Robert. Gina approached and sat next to me on the sofa, taking my hands with that fake tenderness she had perfected. Eleanor, honey, I know this is scary, but imagine if something happens to you, if you have an accident or get sick. Who will be able to help you? Banks won't talk to Robert. Doctors won't be able to make decisions. If I get sick, I will decide what to do myself. But what if you can't decide? What if you have a stroke like my mum's neighbour? She was left unable to speak, unable to walk, and because she didn't have papers signed, her children took months to be able to help her. The manipulation was subtle, but effective. They were sowing seeds of fear about an uncertain future to justify control in the present. That night, while pretending to sleep, I heard them arguing in the living room. She won't sign, Robert was saying, with a frustration he no longer bothered to hide. We have to be more patient, Gina replied, or find another way to convince her. What other way? We already tried fear, logic, affection. We could make her see that she has no choice, that if she doesn't sign, she'll be left alone. How? By telling her that we can't take care of her here anymore, that if she doesn't trust us enough to sign some papers, then she should find somewhere else to live. My heart raced. They were planning to kick me out of the house if I didn't sign the power of attorney. I don't know, Gina. She's my mum. Robert, your mum has $8 million in property, and who knows how much in the bank. If you don't act now, she's going to waste it on silly things or leave it to some church or charity. Is that what you want? For the money that should be yours to be taken by strangers? The truth at last. It wasn't filial love. It wasn't concern for my well-being. It was pure and simple greed. You're right, Robert sighed. Tomorrow we give her the ultimatum. But tomorrow arrived with a surprise neither of us expected. Early in the morning, while Robert was getting ready for work, the doorbell rang. It was my niece Valerie, my late sister's daughter, who lived in Chicago and whom I hadn't seen since last Christmas. Aunt Eleanor, she yelled from the door. What a surprise to find you here. Robert and Gina looked at each other uncomfortably. Valerie was not in their plans. Hello, dear, I said, and for the first time in weeks, my smile was genuine. What are you doing in town? I came for work and wanted to stop by and say hello. I went to your house in Seattle, but it was closed. A neighbor told me you had come to live with Robert. Mrs. Evelyn. My faithful neighbor was still looking out for me even without knowing it. Yes, I'm here, I replied, not knowing how to explain the whole situation. Robert intervened with that business smile he used with clients. Cousin, it's great to see you. Mum came to live with us because she needs more care. Valerie looked at me strangely. She knew me well. She knew I was independent and healthy. Care? But Aunt, you've always been the strongest in the family. Well, I had a fall, I explained, feeling obliged to justify the official version. A fall? Serious? No, just a stumble. But Robert and Gina worried and… Gina interrupted. Valerie, why don't you have breakfast with us? Then you can talk more quietly. During breakfast, Valerie asked me the questions no one else had asked me in weeks. How are you really? Do you feel comfortable here? Do you miss your house? Her questions were like oxygen to someone who was drowning. For the first time in a long time, someone saw me as a person, not as a problem to be solved. Aunt, you're very quiet. That's not like you. Robert coughed uncomfortably. Mum has been a little depressed since she moved. It's normal at her age. Depressed? Valerie looked at me worriedly. Aunt, is that true? I was at a crossroads. I could continue to maintain the facade of a happy family, or I could take advantage of this unique opportunity to talk to someone who knew me, who loved me without ulterior motives. Valerie, could we go for a walk? I'd like to get some air. Of course. There's no problem, is there, Robert? Robert couldn't refuse without looking controlling in front of Valerie. Of course, go ahead. Just take care of your cousin. Sometimes she gets dizzy. Another lie for Valerie. But this time I had a witness. We left the house and walked towards a nearby park. Once we were alone, Valerie took my arm. Aunt, tell me the truth. What's really going on? And then, for the first time since this nightmare began, I was able to tell someone everything. I told her about the pressure to sell my house, the lies about my health, the emails I had found about the power of attorney. Valerie listened in silence, but I saw her expression change from worry to indignation. Aunt, that's not family care. That's financial elder abuse. Financial elder abuse. It had a name. What was happening to me had a name, and it meant I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things. Do you think I'm exaggerating, dear? Exaggerating? Aunt, they are manipulating you into giving up control of your life. And the worst part is that it's your own son. When we returned to the house, Robert and Gina were waiting for us with faces of feigned concern. How did it go? Gina asked. Very well, Valerie replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Aunt was telling me about all the changes in her life lately. Robert and Gina tensed up. What kind of changes? Oh, you know, leaving her house, moving here, the plans for the future. That afternoon, when Valerie left, she promised to call me soon. But before she left, she whispered in my ear, Aunt, you don't have to put up with this. You have options, and you have family who supports you. Her words were like a light in the darkness. I wasn't alone. I wasn't helpless. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I started planning my escape. Valerie's visit had changed something fundamental in the dynamic of the house. Robert and Gina seemed more nervous, more urgent. Their glances at me had lost all pretense of familial affection, and now they were purely calculating, as if they were evaluating the time they had left before their plan fell apart. That same night, Robert called me into his study with a seriousness he hadn't shown before. Mum, Gina and I have been talking. We think maybe it wasn't a good idea for Valerie to come without warning. She's my niece, Robert. She has the right to visit me. Yes, of course. But, well, you went around telling her things that could be misinterpreted. Misinterpreted? The truth couldn't be misinterpreted. I didn't tell her anything that wasn't true. Mum, Valerie doesn't live with us. She doesn't know what happens day to day. She doesn't know about the episodes of confusion you've had. The forgetfulness. The episodes of confusion. The forgetfulness. Robert kept inventing symptoms I didn't have, building a narrative of mental decline that would justify any decision he made about my life. Robert, I haven't had episodes of confusion. Mum, yesterday you asked what day it was 3 times. A lie. I knew perfectly well what day it was every morning. The day before yesterday you got lost going to the bathroom and we found you in the kitchen. Another lie. I had never gotten lost in that house. And last week you put salt in the coffee instead of sugar. And another one. I hadn't made coffee that week. They had forbidden me to use the kitchen in the morning songs. It was obvious that Robert had prepared a list of fictitious symptoms for anyone who questioned my mental capacity, and he had probably memorized it. That's why we need to formalize the power of attorney, Mum, to protect you from yourself. Protect me from myself. The cruelest phrase I had ever heard in my life. Robert, I'm not going to sign that document. His mask of patience finally cracked. Then what do you propose, Mum? That we continue like this? You living here, in our house, refusing to do the one thing that could give us peace of mind? There it was. The implicit threat. Either I signed, or they kicked me out. If you don't want me to live here, I can go back to my house. Your house is deteriorating. It needs repairs that will cost a fortune. And who is going to pay for that? You, with your teacher's pension. That's my problem, Robert. No, Mum. It's our problem. Because when you run out of money fixing up that old house, you'll come asking us for help. Like always. Like always. When had I ever asked Robert for financial help? Arthur and I had paid for his education, his wedding. We had even lent him money for the down payment on his first house. Money which, by the way, he had never paid back. Robert, I have never asked you for money. Really? And who helped you when Dad got sick? Who paid the hospital expenses that your insurance didn't cover? Another distortion of reality. I had paid Arthur's medical expenses by selling my jewellery and using our savings. Robert had contributed a symbolic amount and had since claimed all the credit. Gina appeared in the doorway of the study as if she had been waiting for her cue. Eleanor, we don't want to kick you out. You are family. But we also can't live with this constant tension. What tension? The tension of knowing that you don't trust us. The feeling that you are here reluctantly, as if we were harming you instead of taking care of you. The manipulation was so subtle that for a moment it made me doubt my own perception. Was I really being ungrateful? Was I misinterpreting their intentions? But then I remembered the emails I had seen, the plans to sell my house, the lies about my health. No, I wasn't misinterpreting anything. Gina, if I signed that power of attorney, what would happen next? Well, nothing, mother-in-law. We would just have the peace of mind of knowing that if something happens to you, we can help you immediately. And my house? Robert and Gina exchanged a look that lasted barely a second, but spoke more than 1,000 words. Your house is your house, Mum. No one has said otherwise. But I had seen the emails about the appraisal. I had read about the tax strategies for the sale of family assets. Robert, have you been talking to real estate agencies about my house? Another moment of revealing silence. Mum, I just made some inquiries to find out how much it would cost to repair it, how much it would be worth on the current market. It's useful information for making decisions. What decisions? For example, whether it's worth repairing it, or if it would be better to sell it and invest the money in something that gives you returns. There it was. They had finally shown their cards. They wanted me to sell my house. I don't want to sell my house, Robert. Mum, why do you want it? You're not going back to live there. It's deteriorating. The money from the sale could give you a very good monthly income. An income that they would administer, of course. That's what the power of attorney is for, so you don't have to worry about those things. So that I would have no control over my own money, so that I would depend completely on their will and their decisions. I'm not signing anything, I said, standing up. And tomorrow I'm going back to my house. Robert also stood up, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. It was no longer frustration, it was fury. To your house? Which house? The one that's falling apart? The one with leaks and dampness and electrical problems? It's my house, Robert. I can live wherever I want. You can't. You're not capable of taking care of yourself alone. Look what happened last time. What happened last time? You fell, and you could have killed yourself. I tripped over a hose. It was a minor accident. Minor accidents kill people your age. His shout echoed throughout the house. It was the first time he had yelled at me since he was a teenager. Gina put her hand on Robert's arm, as if trying to calm him down, but her eyes shone with something that looked like satisfaction. Robert is right, Eleanor. At your age, a minor accident can be fatal. That's why you need supervision. Supervision? As if I were a criminal on probation. I don't need supervision. I need respect. Respect is earned, Robert exploded. And it's earned by making smart decisions, not by being stubborn and risking your life and our peace of mind. His phrase hit me like a slap in the face. Respect was earned. As if I, at 73, after having raised him, educated him, and loved him unconditionally, had to earn his respect by behaving the way they wanted. Robert, I said with the calmest voice I could muster, I'm not signing the power of attorney, and tomorrow I'm leaving this house. You're going where? Gina asked, her tone challenging. With who? Valerie? She lives in Chicago. She has her own family. She won't put up with you. That's none of your business. Everything you do is our business, Robert yelled. Because when something happens to you, when you fall and break a hip, when you have a heart attack because you're alone and no one notices, they're going to come looking for us. They're going to say we're unnatural children who abandoned their mother. Then tell them that it was your mother who left because she didn't want to be swindled. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Robert paled. Swindled? What do you mean by that? I had already gone too far to go back. I know perfectly well what you are doing, Robert. I read the emails about the power of attorney. I saw the communication with the real estate agencies. I know you've been planning this since before I moved in here. The silence that followed was absolute. Robert and Gina looked at each other like two thieves who had just been caught red-handed. Mum, Robert finally said, in a voice that sounded strangely calm. I think you're confusing things. Medication sometimes causes paranoia in older people. I don't take medication, Robert. The vitamins we give you have side effects. Sometimes they cause confusion, hallucinations. Hallucinations. Now it turned out that I was hallucinating. The emails I had read with my own eyes were a product of my senile mind. Robert, I know what I saw. Mum, you need help. You need to see a doctor. These episodes of paranoia are serious. Gina nodded with a perfectly rehearsed look of concern. Mother-in-law, Robert is right. Thinking that your own family wants to swindle you is a symptom of something serious. They were doing it again, turning my sanity into madness, my clarity into confusion. But this time I had proof. This time I had the printed emails in my room. I'm going to look for the emails I printed, I said, heading towards the door. What emails? Robert asked. But there was something in his voice that confirmed to me that he knew exactly what I was talking about. I went to my room and looked under the mattress. Nothing. I looked in the nightstand drawer. Not there either. I checked among my clothes, in the suitcase, in all the places where I could have hidden them. The emails had disappeared. I returned to the living room with empty hands and the terrible certainty that they had been searching my room, that nothing in that house was private, that not even my thoughts were safe. Where are they? I whispered. Where are what, Mum? The emails, the documents I printed. Robert and Gina looked at me with that expression of pity that we reserve for the insane and for children. Mum, you haven't printed anything. You don't know how to use the computer. Yes, I know how to use the computer. I've been sending emails since I retired. Mum, please, sit down. You're very upset. But I couldn't sit down anymore. I couldn't pretend that this was normal anymore, that it was family love, that it was legitimate concern. This was a conspiracy, and my own son was at the center of it. That night, lying in my borrowed bed, I made the hardest decision of my life. I wasn't going to wait until tomorrow to leave. I would leave that very night, before they could stop me, before they could invent new symptoms of dementia, before they forced me to sign documents that would take away the last thing I had left. My freedom. At 0 hours 3 minutes, when the house had fallen into the deep silence that only exists in the darkest hours, I got out of bed with the care of a thief in her own prison. Every creak of the floor seemed like a scream that would wake up my captors. Every breath sounded like a hurricane in my ears. I had waited 2 hours after hearing Robert and Gina stop talking in their bedroom. 2 hours counting the minutes on the digital clock that projected red numbers on the ceiling, like a countdown to my freedom. I got dressed in the dark in the clothes I had prepared, my most comfortable skirt, the blouse that Arthur always said made me look elegant, and the shoes that didn't make noise when I walked. In my purse, I put the little that really belonged to me: my identification documents, the photograph of Arthur, my rosary, and the $500 that I kept in cash for emergencies. I never thought that fleeing my own family would be the biggest emergency of my life. I tiptoed down the hallway, avoiding the floorboards that I had identified as the loudest during my weeks of captivity. The front door had 3 locks, but I had observed how Gina opened them every morning, one by one, with the patience of someone disarming a bomb. I was freeing my escape. The fresh air of the dawn hit my face like a blessing. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without feeling that someone was measuring every gulp of air I took. The street was deserted, lit only by streetlights that created circles of yellow light every 50 meters. I walked 3 blocks before daring to call a taxi from my cell phone, that device that Robert constantly said I didn't know how to use, but which had been my lifeline during 40 years of work as a teacher. "Where can I take you, ma'am?" asked the taxi driver, a young man with a sleepy face, who was probably wondering what an old woman was doing alone in the street at 0 hours 4 minutes. "To the bus terminal, please. I had decided to go to Chicago with Valerie." She was the only person in the world who had seen the truth in my eyes, the only one who had questioned the official version of my mental decline. During the ride to the terminal, I dialed her number. It rang several times before she answered with a sleepy voice. "Hello? Valerie, it's me, your Aunt Eleanor." "Aunt? What time is it? Are you okay?" "Honey, I need to ask you a very big favor. Can I come stay with you for a few days? I'll pay for everything. I don't want to be a burden, but—" "Aunt, what's going on? It's 0 hours 4 minutes. I left Robert's house. I can't explain everything over the phone, but you were right about what you told me yesterday. I need help." There was a pause that seemed eternal to me. In that silence, I imagined all the reasons why Valerie might deny me refuge. She had a husband, 2 teenage children, an ordered life that a fugitive aunt could terribly complicate. "Where are you right now?" "I'm on my way to the terminal. I was thinking of taking the first bus to Chicago." "No, Aunt. Don't come yet. Give me 2 hours to straighten things out here, to talk to David and prepare your room. Stay at the terminal, find a safe place to wait, and I'll call you when everything is ready." The tears began to run down my cheeks. Someone was looking out for me. Someone was worrying about my safety without ulterior motives. "Thank you, dear. You don't know what this means to me." "Aunt, one more thing. Does Robert know you left?" "No. They're asleep. But when they wake up—" "When they wake up, they're going to call the police saying you're lost, that you have dementia, that you're a danger to yourself." "I know, Aunt. I've seen these cases before." Valerie worked as a social worker. She had seen elderly people in situations similar to mine. What can I do? First, stay calm. Second, don't answer Robert's calls until we talk. Third, save all the evidence you have of what they've been doing to you. And fourth, trust me. I hung up the phone feeling that for the first time in months, someone was on my side without expecting anything in return. The bus terminal at 0 hours 5 minutes was a complete ecosystem of lives in transit. Entire families sleeping on the waiting benches, migrant workers with their cardboard suitcases, street vendors who were already beginning to offer coffee and donuts for the early morning travelers. I sat down in a coffee shop that was open 24 hours and ordered a latte and a sweet roll. The first bite tasted like freedom. It had been weeks since I had eaten something I had chosen, without supervision, without comments about my diet or my health. At 0 hours, 6 minutes, 30 minutes, my phone started ringing. Robert. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 5 minutes later. I ignored it again. On the third call, I listened to the message. Mom, where are you? We are very worried. Gina went to your room to bring you breakfast and you weren't there. Please call us. If you're upset about yesterday, we can talk. Don't do this to yourself. I wasn't doing anything to myself. I was saving myself. The fourth call was different. This time, Robert sounded genuinely scared. Mum, we already called the hospital, the police, all your acquaintances. No one knows where you are. This is very dangerous. You don't know the city. You don't know how to get around alone. Please, wherever you are, ask someone to call us. The fifth call was from Gina. Eleanor, it's Gina. I know you're upset with us, but this is no way to resolve things. Robert is desperate. We already reported you missing. The police told us they're going to check hospitals and shelters. Please come home. Missing person. As if I were a child lost in the mall. At 0 hours, 7 minutes, 30 minutes, Valerie called me. Aunt, everything is settled. David understood the situation perfectly. He says you are welcome for as long as you need. Did you buy your ticket yet? No. I was waiting for your call. Perfect. Buy the 10 o'clock bus ticket. You'll arrive in Chicago around 0 hours 2 minutes. I'll be waiting for you at the terminal. Valerie, what should I tell them if Robert calls me? Nothing. Don't tell him anything until you're here. Safe. Once you arrive, we'll plan what to do. I bought my ticket feeling a mixture of terror and euphoria. I was doing something that my generation of women rarely did. I was prioritizing my well-being over family expectations. At 0 hours 8 minutes, while waiting in the boarding lounge, I saw something that chilled my blood. Robert and Gina entered the terminal, accompanied by 2 police officers. Robert had a photograph of me in his hands and was showing it to the terminal employees. I immediately got up and walked toward the restrooms, keeping out of their sight. From there, I watched them ask people if they had seen an elderly woman. Disoriented, possibly confused. Disoriented, confused. They continued to build the narrative of my mental incompetence. My bus was delayed for 1 hour, an endless hour where every announcement over the loudspeaker seemed like it was going to say my name, where every blue uniform I saw seemed like it was coming for me. Finally, at 0 hours 11 minutes, I was able to board. I chose a seat in the back, next to the window, and put on my sunglasses even though we were inside the terminal. When the bus started and began to pull away from New York City, I felt 1,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders. I had done it. I had escaped. But my freedom had a price that I hadn't yet fully calculated. During the 3-hour trip, my phone rang constantly. Robert, Gina, unknown numbers that were probably police or social workers. In one of the voicemails, Robert no longer sounded worried. He sounded furious. Mum, we know you are conscious and that you can hear these messages. What you are doing is very selfish. Gina is crying with worry. Is this what you want? To hurt the people who love you? Hurt the people who loved me? As if escaping my manipulators was an act of cruelty toward them. In another message, Gina had adopted a maternal and condescending tone. Eleanor, sweetheart, we understand that you are confused. Sometimes age makes us make decisions that are not rational, but you have to trust us. We are your family. Come back, and we'll forget everything that happened. Forget everything that happened. As if I were the one who had done something wrong, the one who needed forgiveness. When the bus arrived in Chicago, Valerie was waiting for me at the arrivals gate with open arms. The hug she gave me was the first genuine one I had received in months. Aunt, how are you? How do you feel? Scared, honey, but free. Come on, let's go home. David made grilled steak for lunch. He says you need to eat well after all this stress. During the ride to their house, I told her everything. The details I hadn't been able to explain during her visit, the emails I had seen, the pressure to sign the power of attorney, the lies about my mental health. Valerie listened in silence, but I saw her jaw clench with each revelation. Aunt, what they have been doing to you has a legal name. It's called financial elder abuse, and it is a federal crime. A crime? Yes. Using manipulation, coercion, or lies to gain control over an older person's assets is a crime, and Robert and Gina have done all of that. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt validated. What can I do? First, document everything. Second, talk to a lawyer specializing in elder law. Third, regain legal control of your life before they manage to take it away from you. That night, in Valerie's guest room, I slept soundly for the first time since I had arrived at Robert's house. There were no locks on my door. There were no cameras watching me. There was no one measuring how many times I went to the restroom or how long it took me to answer a question. But I knew the war was just beginning. Robert was not going to give up so easily, not when $8 million were at stake. And I was right. The next day, the counterattack began. The counterattack began at 0 hours, 6 minutes the next day. Valerie's phone rang with an insistence that pierced the walls like an emergency siren. From my room, I could hear her voice. First confused by sleep, then tense and defensive. No, Robert. You can't talk to her right now. Yes, she's here. She's fine. She's safe. No, she's not confused. She's perfectly lucid. I got up and walked to the living room, where Valerie was pacing back and forth with the phone pressed to her ear, making gestures of exasperation. Robert, don't yell at me. I'm your cousin, not your employee. What do you mean, kidnapping? You're crazy. Your mother came of her own free will. Kidnapping? Was Robert accusing Valerie of kidnapping me? Valerie saw me and put the phone on speaker so I could listen. You have to understand that Valerie is manipulating you, Robert was saying with that authoritative tone he had perfected. Mum, she doesn't know your real medical situation. She doesn't know about the episodes you've had, the memory problems. Robert, I interrupted him. I don't have memory problems. Mum, thank goodness. We were up all night looking for you. Gina is devastated with worry. I'm perfectly fine, Robert. No, Mum. You're not fine. Leaving the house in the middle of the night without warning. Going to another city with a person who doesn't live with you, who doesn't know your medical needs. That's not normal. There it was again, defining what was normal for me, evaluating my decisions as if I were a minor. Robert, I came to Valerie's house because I wanted to come. Mum, Valerie is putting ideas in your head. She's convincing you that we want to harm you, when all we've done is take care of you. Valerie took the phone. Robert, listen to me very carefully. Your mother is an adult woman, with all her mental faculties intact. She asked me for help, and I am giving it to her. There's nothing illegal about that. Valerie, you don't know anything about the situation. Mum needs constant medical supervision. Her medication has to be taken at specific times. What medication? Valerie asked. There was a revealing pause. The vitamins she takes for osteoporosis and the blood pressure medication. I don't take blood pressure medication, I said out loud. My blood pressure is perfect. Mum, sometimes you forget that you take them. That's why you need supervision. Valerie looked at me with an expression that mixed indignation and disbelief. Robert, if your mother needed blood pressure medication, she would have to take it here too. Where are those medications? Do you have the prescriptions? Another pause. They're at the house, in Mom's medicine cabinet. Perfect. Send them by courier, along with the prescriptions and the reports from the doctor who prescribed them. I can't do that without medical supervision. They are controlled substances. Robert, Valerie said, with the patience of someone who had unmasked professional liars. Vitamins and blood pressure medication are not controlled substances. They can be sent by regular mail. The silence on the other end of the phone was eloquent. Valerie, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Mum needs to come home. Today, we have an appointment with her doctor to evaluate these episodes of confusion. What doctor? I asked. I don't have an appointment with any doctor, Mum. I made the appointment yesterday, after you disappeared. The doctor needs to see you to adjust your medication. Robert, I am not going to any medical appointment that you made without my consent. Mum, please. You are acting irrationally. You are destroying the family. Destroying the family. As if protecting my dignity and my assets were an act of family vandalism. Valerie cut the call. Aunt, do you remember signing any authorization for Robert to make medical appointments on your behalf? Never. I have always handled my own medical affairs. Then he can't make appointments without your consent. And if you really had memory problems or dementia, there would have to be a legal process to obtain medical guardianship. Medical guardianship? It's when a judge determines that a person cannot make their own medical decisions and appoints someone else to do so. But it requires psychiatric evaluations, witnesses, real medical evidence. Robert had none of that because there was nothing to have. I was completely sane. That afternoon, Valerie took me to a lawyer specializing in elder law. Mr. Thompson was a man about 50 years old, with the calmness that comes from the experience of having seen all kinds of family tragedies. Mrs. Stewart, please tell me from the beginning what has been happening. I recounted the entire story. The pressure to move in with Robert, the lies about my health, the emails about the power of attorney, the conversations I had overheard about selling my house. The lawyer took notes with an increasingly serious expression. Mrs. Stewart, do you have documents that prove your mental capacity? Recent medical studies? I have my last medical checkup from 3 months ago. Everything came back normal. Perfect. And do you have documents that prove you own your house in Seattle? Yes. They are in my safety deposit box at the bank. Does your son have access to that safety deposit box? No. Only I have the keys and the authorization. The lawyer smiled for the first time. Very well. That means your assets are protected for now. But we need to act fast. If your son manages to convince a judge that you have dementia, he could obtain temporary guardianship. Is that possible? Unfortunately, yes. I have seen cases where unscrupulous family members use the legal system to gain control over perfectly capable older adults. They present false witnesses, complicit doctors, fabricated evidence. The idea terrified me. Was Robert capable of going that far? What can I do to protect myself? First, we need a full psychiatric evaluation done by an independent doctor to confirm that you are mentally competent. Second, we are going to notify your son in writing that any attempt to obtain guardianship will be legally contested. Third, we are going to review all your documents to make sure you haven't signed anything without realizing it. That same afternoon, the lawyer accompanied me to the bank to check my safety deposit box. Everything was in order. The deeds to my house, my insurance policies, my current will where I left everything to Robert. Mrs. Stewart, do you want to change your will? The question hit me like a punch. Did I really want to disinherit my only son? I don't know. He's my son. Despite everything, he's my son. You don't have to decide now. But think about it. If he gains control over your assets through fraudulent means, do you think he will manage them thinking about your well-being? That night, at Valerie's house, my phone rang again. This time it was Gina. Eleanor, it's me. Please don't hang up. Her voice sounded different, softer, more vulnerable. Eleanor, I know you've been talking to lawyers. Robert is desperate. He hasn't slept in 2 days. Gina, I didn't want us to get to this. I know. And you have a right to be upset. Maybe we were too insistent about the power of attorney. Maybe we didn't respect your space. Maybe they had tried to steal my autonomy and my assets, and it was maybe too insistent. Gina, you lied about my health. You planned to sell my house without my consent. Eleanor, all of that was for your own good, but I understand that you misinterpreted it. Robert is willing to apologize. He is willing to forget the power of attorney, for you to go back to your house if that's what you want. Willing to apologize? As if it were a favor he was doing me. And my house? Are you going to stop pressuring me to sell it? Of course. It's your house. Your decision. She sounded sincere, but I had already learned not to believe Gina's performances. Gina, I appreciate the call, but I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. As much time as I need. Eleanor, you can't stay with Valerie forever. She has her family, her responsibilities. It's not fair to put her in that position. There it was. Manipulation disguised as concern for others. That's something Valerie and I will decide. And what if Robert goes to see you? What if you go together to talk to a family mediator, just to clear things up? A family mediator. It sounded reasonable, mature, civilized, but I had already learned that Robert and Gina's most reasonable proposals were the most dangerous. No, Gina, I'm not going to meet with Robert right now. Then what do you want? Do you want us to never speak again? To break up the family forever? Break up the family? As if the family hadn't been broken from the moment they decided to see me as an ATM instead of as a mother. Gina, I didn't break anything. You broke it when you decided to treat me as if I were incompetent. But we can fix it, Eleanor. Families can always be fixed if there is love and will. Love. That word they had used as a weapon for months. Gina, I'm going to hang up now. Wait. Eleanor, one last thing. Robert wants you to know that he loves you, that he will always love you, that you are his mother, and nothing will change that. I hung up with tears in my eyes, because that was the cruelest part of all, that I also loved him, that despite everything he had done, he was still my son, The child I had carried in my arms, the one I had sung lullabies to, the one for whom I had sacrificed so much. But loving someone didn't mean allowing them to destroy you. That night, Valerie sat with me on the porch of her house, under the Chicago stars. Aunt, what do you feel? Pain, honey. A lot of pain. It's normal. Recognizing that someone you love is hurting you is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Aunt, you are the only one who can decide that. But I'm going to tell you something. In all the years I've been working with older adults, I've never seen anyone regain their dignity by staying in an abusive situation. And what if Robert really changes? If he really apologizes? It could be, but real change takes time, and it requires the person to fully acknowledge what they did wrong. Has Robert acknowledged that he lied to you? That he tried to manipulate you? That he planned to steal your autonomy? No. Robert kept insisting that everything had been for my own good, that I had misinterpreted his intentions. No, he hasn't acknowledged it. Then the change he's offering you is temporary. It's just to get you back, to make you lower your guard. Valerie was right, and in my heart, I knew it. But knowing the truth didn't make it hurt any less. 1 week after my arrival in Chicago, when I had begun to believe that Robert might respect my decision to maintain distance, the blow arrived that confirmed to me how far he was willing to go. Valerie came home from work that afternoon with an expression I hadn't seen before. She had an official envelope in her hands, and the face of someone who had received very bad news. "Aunt, we need to talk," she said, sitting down heavily on the living room sofa. "What happened, honey?" "Robert filed a lawsuit. He is asking a judge to declare that you have senile dementia and that he be appointed your legal guardian." The words arrived like punches to the stomach. A lawsuit. My own son was taking me to court, trying to use the legal system to take away my autonomy. Is that possible? Yes, Aunt. Unfortunately, it is possible. Robert presented medical documents that supposedly show cognitive decline, testimonies from witnesses who claim to have witnessed episodes of confusion, and evidence that you have made irrational decisions, such as fleeing your house in the middle of the night. But those medical documents can't be real. I don't have cognitive decline. The problem's that the legal system is designed to protect older adults, even from themselves. Judges prefer to err on the side of caution. If there is any doubt about your mental capacity, they can grant temporary guardianship while the case is resolved. And what would that mean? That Robert would have control over all your financial, medical, and legal decisions. He could sell your house, move your money, even decide where you live and with whom you can have contact. The room began to spin around me. Everything I had feared, everything I had tried to avoid, was about to happen in the most humiliating way possible, with the legal authority of the state. Valerie, what can I do? We have to prove that you are completely sane. Mr. Thompson has already scheduled a full psychiatric evaluation for tomorrow. We are also going to get witnesses to testify about your mental capacity. And we have to prepare for a hearing where you are going to have to defend your own sanity. I couldn't sleep that night. The irony was too cruel. After a lifetime of working, raising my son, contributing to society, now I had to prove to a stranger in a robe that I deserved to control my own life. The psychiatric evaluation was the next day at a private hospital in Chicago. Dr. Harris was an older man, about 60 years old, with the tired gentleness of someone who had evaluated thousands of human minds. "Mrs. Stewart, we are going to do a series of tests to evaluate your cognitive functions. Don't worry, there are no right or wrong answers." For 3 hours, I answered questions about dates, places, historical events. I solved mathematical problems. I repeated number sequences. I drew geometric shapes. I counted backward from 100 by sevens. I recalled lists of words. I explained popular sayings. Each question reminded me of the absurdity of the situation. I, who had taught hundreds of children to read, who had managed family budgets for 40 years, who had made complex decisions all my life, now had to prove that I knew what day Tuesday was. "Mrs. Stewart, your results are perfect," the doctor told me at the end. "Your cognitive capacity is above average for your age. There is no sign of dementia, cognitive decline, or mental incapacity." Will that be enough to stop Robert's lawsuit? It should be, but I have seen cases where family members insist that the symptoms only appear at home, that the person can act normal during evaluations but be confused in daily life. The fear returned. Would Robert be capable of inventing false witnesses? Of paying complicit doctors? How far was he willing to go for $8 million? The answer came 2 days later, when Valerie showed me what Robert had posted on Facebook. "With great sorrow, we ask for prayers for my mother, Eleanor Stewart. She has developed senile dementia, and in an episode of confusion, she left home. She is currently being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her condition. We are fighting legally to protect her. Any information about her whereabouts? Please contact us." He had uploaded a photo of me from 5 years ago, where I looked more frail, more aged. In the comments, friends and acquaintances expressed their sorrow and promised to pray for my recovery. "Aunt, this is a strategy," Valerie explained. "He is creating a public narrative that you have dementia. When people read this, anything you do will be seen through that filter." Can I respond? Clarify the situation? You could, but Robert would probably use it as evidence that you are agitated or paranoid. It's a trap. If you respond, you confirm that you are out of control. If you don't respond, people assume it's true. I felt like a cornered animal. Robert had turned my own reputation into a weapon against me. But the worst was yet to come. 3 days before the hearing, while Valerie was at work and I was alone at her house reading in the garden, an unexpected visit arrived. It was Mrs. Mary, my former co-worker from school, accompanied by 2 women I didn't recognize. Mary looked uncomfortable, nervous. "Eleanor, honey, how are you? We heard what happened and came to see you." "Mary, it's good to see you. How did you know I was here?" "Robert gave us the address. He's very worried about you." One of the women accompanying Mary introduced herself as Dr. Sanchez, a specialist in geriatrics. The other was a social worker from the Department of Health and Human Services. "Mrs. Stewart, we're here to do a quick evaluation, just to make sure you are well cared for." "What kind of evaluation?" "Nothing complicated. Just a few questions about how you feel, if you're taking your medication, if you understand where you are." It was a trap. Robert had sent these women to evaluate me without legal authorization, probably to obtain evidence he could use at the hearing. "I will not answer any questions without my lawyer present," I said with the firmest voice I could muster. "Mrs. Stewart, don't be suspicious," Mary intervened. "We just want to help you." "Mary, if you really wanted to help me, you would have come alone as a friend, not accompanied by doctors I don't know." Dr. Sanchez took a recorder from her purse. "Mrs. Stewart, could you tell us what day it is today?" "Doctor, I repeat that I will not answer questions without my lawyer present. Your refusal to cooperate will be noted in our report." "Note whatever you want. Now I ask you to leave this property." The women exchanged glances. Mary looked ashamed. "Eleanor, please. Robert just wants to make sure you're okay." "Mary, Robert wants to take away my autonomy and my assets, and you are helping him. How can you say that? He's your son. He loves you. He loves me. Then tell me, Mary, why did he never visit me in the 2 years after Arthur died? Why did he never offer to help me with the funeral expenses? Why did he only become interested in taking care of me after he found out the value of my house? Mary had no answer. The social worker was furiously taking notes. Are you going to leave peacefully, or do I have to call the police? I asked. They left, but I knew the damage was done. In their report, they would say that I had been hostile, paranoid, uncooperative. Robert would use that as evidence of my mental decline. That night I called Mr. Thompson and told him what had happened. Mrs. Stewart did well not to answer their questions, but she is right to worry. They are going to use that visit as evidence that she is being negatively influenced by her niece. Then what can I do? Prepare for the hearing and pray that the judge is wise enough to see the truth. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about all the times I had carried Robert when he was a baby, the nights I stayed up when he had a fever, the sacrifices that Arthur and I had made to give him a good education. How had it come to this? How was the child who had once told me, "I love you, Mummy," now trying to convince a judge that I was mentally ill? At 0 hours 6 minutes, Valerie brought me a cup of coffee and sat next to me on the bed. Aunt, how do you feel? Scared, honey. Very scared. It's okay to be afraid. But remember something. You didn't do anything wrong. You're only defending your right to control your own life. And what if the judge believes Robert? Then we will appeal, and we will continue fighting until justice is done. I got dressed in my navy blue suit, the same one I had worn for my retirement from school. I carefully combed my hair and put on the pearl earrings that Arthur had given me on our 30th anniversary. If I was going to fight for my sanity, I would do it with dignity. The family court in Chicago was a modern building, cold, full of families in crisis waiting for strangers to decide their destinies. When we arrived, Robert was already there with Gina and an expensive-looking lawyer. Robert looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that might have been pain, but he immediately looked away. Mrs. Stewart, Mr. Thompson told me, remember, answer only what they ask you. Be clear and direct. Don't let yourself be provoked. When the judge entered the courtroom, we all stood up. He was a man about 50 years old, with a serious but not cruel expression. The hearing is now open to determine the mental capacity of Mrs. Eleanor Stewart in response to the petition for guardianship filed by her son, Robert Stewart. My destiny was in the hands of that man, and for the first time in months, I didn't know if my future would include my freedom. Robert's lawyer stood up first, with the confidence of someone who believed they had all the winning cards. He was a man about 40 years old, an expensive suit, a red tie, and that shark smile that characterizes certain types of lawyers. Your Honor, the case we present today is heartbreaking but necessary. Mr. Robert Stewart is forced to request guardianship of his mother, Mrs. Eleanor Stewart, due to progressive mental decline that has led her to make decisions that put her safety and assets at risk. Hearing a stranger talk about me as if I were a defective object that needed repair was more humiliating than I had imagined. Mrs. Stewart has shown episodes of confusion, memory loss, and erratic behavior. 2 weeks ago, she abandoned her home in the middle of the night without notifying her family, putting herself in grave danger. She is currently under the influence of people who are taking advantage of her vulnerable mental state. Every word was like a stab. Robert had turned my escape to freedom into evidence of madness. We present medical testimonies, witness statements, and documentary evidence that demonstrates that Mrs. Stewart can no longer make rational decisions about her life and assets. The lawyer began to present his evidence. First, a medical report from a doctor I had never seen, who described symptoms compatible with early dementia based on Robert's family testimony. Your Honour, Dr. Miller evaluated Mrs. Stewart's behaviour according to her son's reports and found patterns consistent with cognitive decline. Did Dr. Miller personally examine my client? Mr. Thompson asked. It was not necessary, Your Honour. The symptoms reported by the family are clear enough for a preliminary diagnosis. The judge frowned. Even to me, it seemed strange for a doctor to diagnose dementia without examining the patient. Then they presented the witness statements. Gina had stated in writing that she had seen me confused on multiple occasions, that I often forgot conversations we had had the day before, and that I had tried to cook with the stove turned off. Every one of these claims was a lie, but they were presented with such conviction that I started to doubt my own memory. Had all that really happened? Was it possible that I had forgotten these episodes? Mary, my former co-worker, had signed a statement saying that during my visit to Chicago, I had seemed paranoid and hostile, that I had refused to cooperate with medical professionals, and that I appeared to be under the influence of third parties. Mary's betrayal hurt more than Gina's lies. We had worked together for 30 years. She had been the godmother of her youngest son. How could she have signed those lies? Finally, they presented evidence of my erratic behavior. The money transfers I had made to protect my savings, my refusal to sign the power of attorney, and my flight in the middle of the night. Therefore, Your Honour, these behaviours clearly show that Mrs. Stewart can no longer distinguish between rational decisions and paranoia. A mentally competent person does not flee from their family in the middle of the night, does not distrust the people who love them, does not hide money as if she were the victim of a conspiracy. The lawyer had turned every act of self-defense into a symptom of madness. My intelligence in protecting my assets was paranoia. My refusal to be manipulated was erratic behavior. My escape to freedom was evidence of mental incapacity. When he finished his presentation, it was Mr. Thompson's turn. Your Honour, what we have heard is not legitimate medical evidence. It is a smear campaign designed to justify the theft of assets from a perfectly sane woman. He stood up with dignity and began to dismantle every argument. First, the supposed medical diagnosis. Dr. Miller never examined Mrs. Stewart. His diagnosis is based solely on the reports of the very person who would benefit from a declaration of incapacity. This is not medicine. It is professional negligence. Second, the witness testimonies. Mrs. Gina Stewart has a direct financial interest in the outcome of this case. Her statement is inherently biased. As for Mrs. Mary Lopez, her evaluation was made during an unauthorized visit, without Mrs. Stewart's consent, and in the company of professionals who had no legal right to be there. Third, the supposed erratic behavior. Your Honour, is it erratic for a woman to protect her savings when she discovers that her family plans to steal them? Is it irrational to refuse to sign documents that would hand over control of her life to other people? Is escaping from an abusive situation a symptom of dementia? Mr. Thompson then presented our evidence. The results of the full psychiatric evaluation I had undergone, where I scored perfectly on all cognitive tests. Your Honour, here is the real medical evidence. Mrs. Stewart was evaluated by Dr. Harris, a certified psychiatrist with 20 years of experience in geriatric evaluations. Her results show cognitive capacity superior to the average for her age. He also presented copies of the emails I had seen, where Robert and the real estate agencies discussed the sale of my house. Your Honour, these documents prove that Mr. Stewart has been planning to dispose of his mother's assets without her consent. This is not filial care. This is financial elder abuse. Finally, he presented statements from people who knew me well. the principal of the school where I had worked, neighbors from Seattle who could testify about my mental competence, and Valerie, who had observed my behavior during the last few weeks. Your Honor, we request that Mrs. Stewart be allowed to testify in her own defense, that the court hear directly from her, that it evaluate her mental capacity firsthand. The judge nodded. Mrs. Stewart, are you willing to testify under oath? Yes, Your Honor. I stood up and walked toward the stand with my back straight and my head held high. If I was going to fight for my sanity, I would do it with all the dignity I had left. The judge looked me directly in the eyes. Mrs. Stewart, do you understand the proceedings that are taking place here today? Perfectly, Your Honor. My son is trying to use the legal system to take away control of my life and my assets based on false claims about my mental capacity. Can you explain to me why you left your son's house in the middle of the night? Because I had discovered that they were planning to rob me, Your Honor. I found emails where they discussed how to obtain legal control over my assets. I overheard conversation where they planned to sell my house without my consent. I did not flee out of confusion. I fled for survival. Why did you refuse to sign the power of attorney that your son proposed? Because a broad power of attorney would have given him total control over my life, Your Honor. He would have been able to sell my house, move my money, even decide where I live and who I have contact with. And he was processing all of this behind my back, before asking me to sign it. The judge took notes as I spoke. His expression was serious, but not hostile. Mrs. Stewart, have you had episodes of confusion or memory loss? No, Your Honor. Everything that has been said about my mental state are lies. I manage my own finances. I cook for myself. I correspond with friends. I read novels. I solve crossword puzzles. My mind is as clear as it was when I was a teacher. How do you explain the testimony of the people who claim to have witnessed these episodes? Your Honor, the people who testified against me have financial interests in the outcome of this case. My daughter-in-law would directly benefit if my son gained control over my assets. As for my former co-worker, she was deceived by my son into participating in an unauthorized medical evaluation, and when I refused to cooperate with that violation of my rights, she interpreted my firmness as hostility. Robert's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The lady is exhibiting exactly the type of paranoia we have described. Your Honor, I replied before the judge could speak. It's not paranoia when they are actually conspiring against you. I have documentary evidence of their plans. The emails exist. The conversations I overheard are real. My son is robbing me, and when I defend myself, he calls me crazy. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge looked at me for a long moment. Mrs. Stewart, what is it that you want? I want to control my own life, Your Honor. I want to decide where I live, how I spend my money, and who has access to my personal affairs. I want my son to respect me as the adult, capable woman that I am, not treat me like a defective burden that needs to be managed. And what if the court were to determine that you need some form of supervision? Your Honor, I accept that a time comes in life when older people may need help, but that time must be determined based on real medical evidence, not on the greed of family members who want access to an estate. If one day I truly lose my mental faculties, I hope there are legal systems that protect me, but today is not that day. When I finished testifying, I sat down feeling strangely at peace. I had spoken my truth. I had defended my sanity before a court. I had fought for my dignity with the only weapons I had, honesty and the clarity of my mind. The judge withdrew to deliberate. The next 30 minutes were the longest of my life. When he returned, his expression was serious but resolute. After reviewing all the evidence presented, This court determines that Mrs. Eleanor Stewart possesses full mental and legal capacity to make her own decisions. I felt as if 1,000 tons had been lifted from my shoulders. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, this court orders an investigation into possible financial elder abuse, based on the evidence presented regarding attempts to gain fraudulent control over Mrs. Stewart's assets. Robert paled. Gina sank into her chair. Mrs. Stewart has the right to live where she wishes, to manage her own affairs, and to make all decisions related to her life and assets. Any future attempt to interfere with these rights will be considered contempt of court. I had won. Not only had I retained my freedom, I had publicly exposed Robert's attempted theft, but as I left the courthouse, I knew this victory would come at a price. I had won my independence, but I had lost my son forever. And that loss, though necessary, hurt more than I had imagined. The exit from the courthouse should have been a moment of absolute triumph, but as I walked through those hallways with my legal freedom restored, all I felt was a deep emptiness in my chest. I had won the right to control my life, but I had lost the only son I had. Robert and Gina left without saying a word to me, not a look, not a gesture, not even the minimum courtesy of acknowledgement. They simply disappeared, as if I had died to them at that moment. Valerie took my arm as we left the building. "Aunt, how do you feel?" "Free, honey, but also very lonely." Mr. Thompson caught up with us on the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Stewart, congratulations. Not only did you win your case, the judge ordered an investigation into your son. It is very likely that he will face charges for attempted financial abuse." The news should have given me satisfaction, but it only filled me with sadness. Robert was my son. Despite everything he had done, he was still the baby I had carried in my arms, the child I had comforted during nightmares, the young man who had cried on my shoulder when he fell in love for the first time. "Lawyer, is it possible for me to withdraw the complaint?" Valerie looked at me in surprise. "Aunt, are you sure?" "Mrs. Stewart," the lawyer intervened, "the investigation no longer depends on you. The state has an interest in prosecuting these cases to protect other older adults. Furthermore, your son could interpret any gesture of clemency as weakness and try to attack you again." He was right, but that didn't make it hurt any less. That night, at Valerie's house, I sat in the garden under the Chicago stars and called Robert. I needed to try one last approach, one last chance to save something of our relationship. The phone rang several times before he answered. "What do you want?" His voice sounded cold, hostile. "Robert, it's your mother. I wanted to talk to you." "You are no longer my mother. My mother was a woman who respected her family, who trusted her son. You are a stranger who publicly humiliated me." His words pierced me like daggers. "Son, I didn't want us to get to this." "Don't call me son." "Son. Sons don't report their parents. Sons don't destroy their family for money." "Robert, you were the one who took me to court. You were the one who tried to take away my autonomy. Because you needed protection. Because you are being manipulated by Valerie and her lawyers. But you preferred to believe them over your own flesh and blood. Robert, do you really believe I'm mentally ill?" There was a long pause. In that silence, I waited to hear some vestige of the love we had once shared. "I think you are no longer the woman who raised me. That woman would never have destroyed her family out of pride." "Pride? Robert, I just wanted to maintain control of my own life." "Your life was already over. You are an old woman. Your job was to trust me and let me take care of you. But you preferred strangers." "Valerie is not a stranger. She's my niece." Valerie is an opportunist who took advantage of your paranoia. And now, because of you, I'm going to face criminal charges. My reputation is destroyed. My career is ruined. His career. His reputation. Not a single word about my well-being, about my pain, about the betrayal I had felt. Everything revolved around how my self-defense had affected him. Robert, did you ever stop to think about how I felt? What it meant to me to know that my own son was planning to rob me? I wasn't robbing you. I was protecting you from yourself. But you turned it into something dirty, something criminal. Son, trying to gain control over my money without my consent is criminal. You are my mother. Everything you have should be mine someday. I was just making sure you didn't waste it. There was the final truth. It wasn't about taking care of me. It was about securing his inheritance. I was simply a temporary obstacle between Robert and the money he considered his by right. Robert, when I die, you will inherit everything I have. It was always that way. But while I am alive, my money is mine. You could die tomorrow. You could develop real dementia. You could be swindled by any criminal. At least with me, you knew the money would stay in the family. With the family that doesn't respect me, that lies to me, that tries to manipulate me, we loved you. Everything we did was out of love. Robert, love doesn't lie. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't try to take away the autonomy of the loved one. You don't understand what love is. Love is sacrifice. It's putting family first. It's trusting even if you don't understand. You're right, son. I sacrificed 40 years of my life for you. I put your education before my own needs. I trusted you even when you started to show who you really were. That is love. What you did to me is not. What I did to you was take care of you. And this is how you repay me. Robert, I'm going to hang up now. But I want you to know something. Despite everything, you are still my son. You will always be my son. If someday you want a real relationship with me, based on mutual respect, I will be here. But I will never again allow you to treat me as if I were your property. If you hang up that phone, don't ever look for me again. As far as I'm concerned, you died today in that courthouse. His words were like a shot to the heart, but I hung up anyway. I stayed sitting in the garden crying under the stars, feeling the weight of a loss that was different from any other I had experienced. When Arthur died, it had been terrible, but it was natural death, the inevitable end of a life well lived. This was different. This was the voluntary death of a relationship, the deliberate murder of love. Valerie came out and sat next to me without saying a word. She simply put her hand on my shoulder and let me cry. Aunt, did you talk to Robert? Yes. He says that as far as he's concerned, I died today. I'm so sorry, Aunt. Do you know what the saddest thing is, honey? That he is right about one thing. The woman who raised him did die today. That woman who sacrificed without limits, who trusted without questioning, who put the needs of others before her own. That woman died when I decided to defend myself. And is that bad? No, honey. It's necessary, but it hurts like a real death. The next day, I made a decision I had been putting off since I arrived in Chicago. I called Mr. Thompson and asked him to change my will. Mrs. Stewart, are you sure? It's a very important decision. I'm sure. I want to leave my house to Valerie, who took me in when I had nowhere to go. I want to leave my savings to foundations that help older adults in abusive situations. And I want to leave Robert exactly what he showed me I am worth to him. Nothing. Don't you want to leave him something symbolic? A small amount to show that it wasn't out of spite? Lawyer, I am going to leave him something. I'm going to leave him a letter explaining why I made this decision, so that when I am no longer here, he understands that actions have consequences, that love cannot be bought with emotional blackmail, and that trying to steal your mother's dignity has a price. That week, I also decided to return to Seattle to reclaim my house. I couldn't continue to be Valerie's guest forever, no matter how much she insisted I was welcome. Aunt, you can stay here as long as you want. I know, honey, and I thank you more than you can imagine, but I need to return to my home. I need to prove that I can live independently, that my decision to fight for my autonomy was not a whim, but a real necessity. Valerie accompanied me back to the city. When we opened the door of my house in Seattle after 2 months of absence, the stuffy air and the smell of dampness greeted me like old friends. The house needed work. The roof leak had worsened. The garden was a jungle, and there was a layer of dust over everything. But it was mine. It was my refuge, my castle, the place where I could be Eleanor Stewart without explanations or justifications. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? Valerie asked me before leaving. Honey, I've been alone since your Uncle Arthur died. The difference is that now I am alone by choice, not by abandonment. That first night back, I sat in my rocking chair by the window, watching the street where I had lived for 30 years. The neighbours who passed by greeted me with surprise and joy. Mrs. Evelyn came running from her house. Eleanor, it's great to see you. I thought you had moved away forever. No, Evelyn. I just had to leave for a while to remember who I am. That night, for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own memories. There were no locks to keep me in. There was no supervision to judge me. There were no lies to confuse me. There was only silence, peace, and the deep satisfaction of having fought for my dignity and having won. But I knew the real test was just beginning. I had recovered my freedom, but now I had to prove that I deserved it. I had to rebuild my life from scratch at 73, without the family safety net I had taken for granted for decades. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my adult life, my future belonged entirely to me. The first few months back in my house were like learning to walk again. Every decision, from what to eat for breakfast to how to organize my day, was completely mine. There were no external voices telling me what was best for me, what I should do, how I should live. I hired Mr. Stephen, a builder recommended by Mrs. Evelyn, to fix the roof leak. While he worked, I dedicated myself to restoring my garden. Every plant I pruned, every flower I planted, was an act of faith in my own future. I was investing in a tomorrow that, for the first time in a long time, I felt belonged to me. One morning, while I was watering my geraniums, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Christine, one of my former students, now a woman about 40 years old, with children of her own. Teacher Eleanor, it's such a pleasure to find you. Mrs. Evelyn told me you had returned. Christine, dear, how are you? How is your family? Everyone is fine, teacher, but I came because, well, I heard what happened with Robert. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. My heart sank. The legal scandal had been public, reported in local newspapers. My story had stopped being private. What are they saying? Most people say you did well to defend yourself, teacher. Many people here have seen similar cases. Children who only show up when they smell an inheritance, who treat their parents as burdens. Her words comforted me more than I expected. I wasn't alone in my experience. I wasn't the only older woman who had had to choose between dignity and family peace. But I also came for something else, teacher. I have a proposition. Christine worked as an educational coordinator for a foundation that taught literacy to older adults in low-income neighborhoods. She asked me if I would be interested in teaching as a volunteer. Teacher, you were always the best. The children who passed through your classroom learned not only to read, but to think. Now there are many seniors who never had that opportunity. The idea deeply excited me. To teach again, but this time out of pure vocation, without administrative pressures, without the burden of maintaining a career, just for the love of education. When can I start? 2 weeks later, I was in front of a group of 12 older adults at a community centre in the local area. Men and women from 60 to 80 years old, who had worked all their lives without learning to read correctly, who now wanted to fulfill that postponed dream. Good morning. I am Teacher Eleanor, and you are going to be my new students. The first class was magical, seeing the concentration on their faces as they formed their first syllables. The joy when they managed to read a complete word. It reminded me why I had chosen to be a teacher 40 years ago. Mr. Patrick, a 75-year-old man who had been a builder all his life, timidly raised his hand. Teacher, do you think at my age I can still really learn? Mr. Patrick, learning has no age. The mind is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets. After 3 months, Mr. Patrick could read the entire newspaper. Mrs. Carroll wrote her first letter to a son who lived in the Midwest. Mr. Robert read a story to his grandson for the first time. Every small triumph of my students was also my own triumph. I had found a purpose beyond survival, beyond self-defense. I had found a way to turn my life experience into something useful for others. One day, after class, Mrs. Carroll approached my desk. Teacher Eleanor, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Mrs. Carroll. Is it true that your son tried to take your things? The question took me by surprise, but the honesty in her eyes convinced me to answer. Yes, Mrs. Carroll, it's true. And how did you feel when you realized? Like my heart had been ripped out, but also as if for the first time in my life I was seeing the truth clearly. Mrs. Carroll nodded slowly. My daughter wants to send me to a nursing home, teacher. She says I can't take care of myself anymore, but I feel fine. I can manage on my own. It's just that, well, my house is worth a lot of money now, and she has debts. My story was being repeated in other families, with other women, in other places. Financial elder abuse was more common than I had imagined. Mrs. Carroll, do you want to go to a nursing home? No, teacher. I want to stay in my house until God calls me. Then don't go. Seek legal help. Talk to social workers. But don't let anyone force you to give up your autonomy. But what if it's my daughter? What if she says she loves me? Mrs. Carroll, true love respects the will of the loved one. Control is not love, even if it is disguised as concern. That conversation made me realize that my experience could serve a greater purpose. I talked to Christine about the possibility of creating workshops on elder rights, on how to recognize and defend oneself against family abuse. Teacher, that's an excellent idea. There are many organizations that would be interested in supporting this type of program. 6 months after returning to my house, I was giving workshops at community centers all over Seattle. Dignity and autonomy in later life became a program requested by many institutions. In every workshop, I saw faces that reflected my own experience. Older women and men who had begun to feel invisible in their own families, who struggled with the pressure to hand over control of their lives to children who knew better what was good for them. The first symptom of abuse, I would tell them, is not physical violence. It's when someone else starts defining what is normal for you, what you should feel, what you should want. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional workshop, where 3 women had shared stories similar to mine, I received a call I didn't expect. Mrs. Stewart, this is Attorney Patricia Baker from the District Attorney's Office. We wanted to inform you that the case against your son, Robert Stewart, has been closed. Closed? Why? Your son accepted a non-prosecution agreement. He acknowledged the facts. He paid a considerable fine. And he committed not to contact you again without your express consent. In exchange, he will not have a criminal record. He acknowledged the facts? Yes, ma'am. He officially admitted to attempting to gain fraudulent control over your assets. It's in the court records. It was a bittersweet victory. Robert had legally admitted what I always knew was true, but that didn't alleviate the pain of having lost him. That night, I sat in my rocking chair with a cup of chamomile tea and reflected on the year that had passed. I had started as an invisible old woman in my daughter-in-law's house, manipulated and controlled. Now I was a 74-year-old woman who taught classes, gave workshops, and helped other people defend their dignity. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Stewart, this is Sandra Davis, producer of the Iron Women program on Channel 5. We heard your story and would like to invite you to share your experience on our show. On television? Yes, ma'am. We believe your story can inspire many women who are going through similar situations. Part of me wanted to decline. Turning my family pain into a public spectacle seemed inappropriate. But another part thought of Mrs. Carroll, of the women in my workshops, of all the older people who were being manipulated in silence. When would the recording be? Next Tuesday, if that suits you. I accept, but with one condition. I want the program to include information on where people can seek legal and psychological help if they are in similar situations. Of course, Mrs. Stewart. That was exactly our intention. The program aired 1 month later. The Grandmother Who Refused to Be a Victim was the title they chose. Seeing my story told on television, hearing my own words repeated to millions of people was surreal. But the responses were immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang for days with calls from women who wanted to share their own stories, who asked for advice, who sought the name of my lawyer. One call in particular moved me deeply. It was a 68-year-old woman from Los Angeles. Mrs. Eleanor, I'm Hope Jackson. I saw your program yesterday and cried throughout the broadcast. My story is identical to yours, but I haven't had the courage to defend myself. Mrs. Hope, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite the fear. But how? How do you stop loving a son who is hurting you? You don't stop loving them, Mrs. Hope, but you learn to love in a way that doesn't destroy you. Love for others cannot require hatred for yourself. After that call, I decided to write a book. Dignity, Not Negotiable, Memoirs of a Rebel Grandmother. It was published 1 year later. It was my complete story, but also a practical guide for older people facing family abuse. The day of the book launch, at a bookstore in Seattle, more than 200 people showed up, men and women of all ages, but mainly older adults who had found a mirror of their own struggles in my story. During the question and answer session, a woman about 70 years old raised her hand. Mrs. Stewart, do you ever regret fighting? Do you ever think it would have been easier to simply give in? Ma'am, it would have been easier, yes, but it would not have been right. Ease is not a criterion for important decisions. Dignity is. And don't you miss your son? The question hit me as it always did, because I did miss Robert. I missed the child he had been. I missed the relationship we had before money came between us, but I no longer missed the version of him that had tried to rob me. I miss the son I thought I had. I don't miss the man I discovered he was. At the end of the event, while I was signing books, a young woman approached with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Stewart, I am not an older adult. but I am a victim of family abuse. My husband controls all my money, all my decisions. Your story gave me hope that I can get out of this situation. Honey, abuse is abuse, regardless of the victim's age, and dignity is a fundamental human right. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. That night, back in my house, I sat in my garden under the stars. My lemon tree had given fruit again. My geraniums bloomed in the pots that I myself had chosen and placed. My house smelled of lavender and coffee, the aromas that I had decided would define it. I was 75 years old. I lived alone, but I was not lonely. I had purpose. I had impact. I had the deep satisfaction of having turned my pain into a tool to help others. Robert had never contacted me again. Sometimes I saw his name in business news. Apparently, he had prospered professionally despite the legal scandal. Gina had posted photos on social media of expensive vacations, elegant restaurants, the kind of life they had planned to finance with my assets. But it no longer hurt to see those images. They no longer filled me with anger or sadness. They simply confirmed that I had made the right decision. My life was now mine, completely mine, and it had turned out to be richer, more meaningful, more fulfilling than I had ever imagined possible at my age. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Valerie. "Aunt, how did the book launch go?" "Wonderful, honey. A lot of people came. We sold all the copies, and I think the message reached who it needed to reach. Aunt, I am so proud of you. You have turned one of the most painful experiences of your life into something that is helping thousands of people. Thank you, honey, and thank you for giving me refuge when I needed it most. Without you, none of this would have been possible." After hanging up, I stayed in the garden a little longer. Tomorrow, I would teach another literacy class. On Thursday, I had a workshop on elder rights. Next month, I would travel to Dallas to give a lecture at a conference on dignified aging. My schedule was full, but full of things that I had chosen to do. My time belonged to me. My life belonged to me. And for the first time since Arthur's death, I felt completely at peace. The invisible old woman who had been manipulated in Robert's house had died. In her place, a woman had been born who knew her worth, who defended her dignity, and who had learned that it is never too late to start anew.